what is it that we have to do to become brothers who love one another and trust each other and give each other the benefit of the doubt in generous ways, so that even when we disagree, we know that we're not assigning motivations and we're not assigning ill intent, and we're able to see each other in very gracious ways, because that only just furthers the connection, and only furthers the communication, it only furthers the collaboration, and it only furthers your ability to contribute to what God's doing.
Yeah. And if we'll do all of that, then we can see Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and the ends of the earth. We are going to jump into this conversation today around these C's that we talked about on our last podcast episode of connect, communicate, collaborate, which I've heard some people using, especially in our North American context. But Dave, you've really been bringing in a fourth C of contribute, which I think is an essential C, the more that I process it, towards what does this mean to pursue the mission of the kingdom in a way that isn't limited by me, but really sees me as a part of the larger kingdom of what God wants to do. And so the way this has been shaping me, I'll frame it up and then I want your thoughts, but is going back to one of the commissions that we see in the Gospels and then into the book of Acts. There's 5 of them, right? In Acts 1:8, where as Jesus is releasing them to go, he says, go and wait in Jerusalem, and the Spirit's going to come on you to be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And I know there's different ways to process through that passage. We can dive there if you want. But what that's really started to help me to do is to think not just linear sequential, that these are supposed to all happen in a linear sequential way, but that he's giving them a commission to engage all of these. And so there's all these nations gathered right there in Jerusalem shortly after that. And then the whole rest of the book of Acts is about the and. And so there's some linear sequence, right, but it's and happening. And that only happens if there's connecting, communicating, collaborating, and a contribution mindset that comes out of that. So that's teeing it up. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when we were talking in the last podcast and these 4 C's just kind of slipped out of your mouth in the middle of you talking about the ways in which you're trying to get teaming together. I think at the end of the day, any type of team or teaming that we work with is built on one word, and that's relationship.
Yeah.
And relationship, whether it be our kids, whether it be our spouses, whether it be our friends, our coworkers, in this case, people that we're wanting to partner with in terms of mission, it's built upon relationship. Because I think at the end of the day, Mark, trust has everything to do with whether or not what we're after is going to happen. And those 4 C's, to me, foster an environment of relationship built on trust. And if we can get to the place to where we trust each other and we know what each other is about, then that just opens up relational, like, I'm going to use my word synergy again, but it opens up the ability for things to move much faster, much smoother, much easier. And we're having a hard enough time as we go after the gates of hell as it is. And so that trust and those relationships between each other are going to be vital. I'll go back and I'd even say, how important that trust relationship is when we watch those 4 happen, right? Your connect, your
communicate.
My COVID fog still hitting me. My connect, my communicate, my collaborate, and my contribution. I even go back to Acts 15, and we look at that passage and we ask, okay, what's happening in Acts when the church has its first big kind of blowout, right? And the answer was the ends of the earth was happening while Jerusalem was happening. And all of a sudden, there's a trust issue.
Yeah. That's good.
What's going on? And we don't know. And we see those 4 C's take place where they're connecting. Okay, let's bring everybody together. Let's talk about this, right? Let's communicate with each other and let's figure it out. And then they begin to collaborate in terms of, okay, once we see what happens, right? Peter stands up, tells everybody, I've seen the Holy Spirit. This is what's happening. Everybody got to the place to where they're like, okay, we see it, we understand it. But then they had to start dealing with, what do we do about it? Yeah. And we see the Jerusalem letter be a product of collaboration. Okay, we want you to abstain from these things, but we trust that Jesus is in you. And then Paul, who was one of the main guys who they were like, okay, what's he doing? What's going on? Takes that letter, right?
Yep.
from the Jerusalem Council, and he passes it among all the churches to encourage them, and to say, hey, your contribution, what you're doing, they recognize it, they see it, they celebrate it. We're all on the same team. And then we watch the book of Acts just, rocket ship out of Acts 15, because they basically took that time to pause and do those 4 C's together to get on the same page and rebuild that trust.
I think that's really good. And to use your example there of Acts 15, there's a passage that I feel like the Lord has just got me in as a leader, and that's this John 12:24 passage again, where Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone, but if it dies, it can bring forth much fruit. And so I look at that gathering of leaders there, and the only way that those 4 C's would happen for the gospel to continue to forward, to accomplish Acts 1:8, the and, is if they were willing to see the contribution piece that they brought as not having to be only about them or only about their piece, because it really could have easily hijacked the whole book of Acts right there at that point and shut down the continued forward motion of the gospel if those leaders had not been able to say, hey, it seems like God's moving over here. It seems like what Peter's got. So they've got to be acknowledging Paul, acknowledging Peter, and saying, you know what? That sounds like that's God. And I'm going to contribute my piece. I don't even fully understand all of what they're doing, but I celebrate that. And I receive their contribution to what God's doing.
Yeah. And if we even make a jump into some of the practicals of what those 4 look like, I would say the number of signal groups or WhatsApp groups that I'm a part of is actually probably a little annoying. I have some of them muted just because I don't have to be an active contributor to all of them all the time.
Yeah.
But part of the reason why I'm in so many is that it's just creating, like, it's a way of taking a connection that I have, that I know that the Lord's put together, and keeping lines of communication open so that when something pops up that I want to learn from, or that I want to share an encouragement for, we have that connection, we have that communication, and collaboration can happen very quickly. And I think sometimes the hardest hurdle to get over is that, even as we talked about the difference between relationships, like who's the people I'm with all the time and who's the people I'm with just some of the time.
Yeah. And
I think that contribution C actually is very helpful in that, because I'm going to spend the most time with the people who have a desire to contribute in the ways that are closest to mine. Geographically in Oklahoma City, among UPGs in Oklahoma City, those people are going to be the ones that I'm around, and it's easy to connect, communicate, and collaborate with them. But I think sometimes we go, if the relationship isn't that strong, what is the basis by which we keep that connection alive? To make that collaboration happen, to make that trust continue to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think so. And I think the other piece that I've watched you do really well, Dave, and even just giving that practical example of the signal groups, is the collaborate and the contribute piece really is contingent on you being aware that you don't have the same role or the same function in every single circle or group or church or network or whatever that you walk into. And so it's that awareness that when you walk in the door or when you get into that signal group, what is your role here? How do they receive you? And what do you bring to the table in this group? And you might do something totally different in the local church that you're leading in versus a network or a leaders that you're connecting with at a broad level. And so that collaboration and contribution piece, even practically, again, looking like assessing what do I bring to the table here, and how are they receiving me, and how do I serve them from that strength?
Yeah, and I'll give a real practical example of that. Putting a mid-level together in Oklahoma for the fall, trying to find what is the best place for me to be able to contribute to what we're doing to get that mid-level together. And I've had 4 or 5 really good conversations with people where we're just clarifying, right? Where we connect, we literally are just talking about what is it we want to do, and then sorting that out of going, okay, what do you need me to do? What do you want you to do? And my skill set of being able to, do some of the logistics really quickly, simple stuff. how are we going to eat? Where are we going to stay? How do we get there? What's the information? Like, how do we post it for people to get to it? My years and years and years of being on church staffs as a youth pastor makes my event planning much faster than most everybody else's, right?
Yeah.
Where, I've got a spreadsheet where I put 5 numbers in and it spits out the bottom, the cost of each person. Okay. That's over years and years and years of event and mission trip planning and those kind of things. So for me, in this particular collaboration, my skill set is spit out what's it going to cost for everybody at the bottom and just tell us what we got to do. And then go, y'all show up. Don't worry. You'll have a place to sleep. You'll have a place to eat. Right. That's what I'm talking about. This is real life right here, brother.
Hi, buddy. Hey.
There's nothing better than podcasting when your twin boy comes in his underwear. That's awesome.
Real life.
It's real life. The skill set for you, Mark, right now is potty training, right?
Oh my goodness, it is. Yeah. Talk about connect, communicate, contribute, collaborate with my wife. My goodness, working it out. And talking about the seed falling to the ground and dying.
That's why I told you raising toddlers and potty training it reminds you as a parent, you're not actually in control.
That's right. But yeah,
I would just go back to that conversation. That one last little point is that regardless of the season that we're in, those 4 C's are something that's always necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're in a team that's just forming and trying to find their footing, or you're in a seasoned team that's been around for 10 years, those 4 C's are constantly what allows that to continue to function.
Yeah, that's good. And then I think, just to highlight again, I think the only way that works, what happened in Acts 15, is if leaders have embraced inner formation by Christ, and they're not attaching their identity to a position or to a role. And so
it's good.
If we're gonna see those 4 C's happen and see and happen, it's absolutely essential that the leaders involved submit their inner formation to Christ and allow him to be the one with his hand on the steering wheel, because otherwise it's going to be it's going to be segmented out, each of those things. And you and I both know, we've talked about this. I mean, the Great Commission could be done this year if everybody would get in the game and have a vision for letting Jesus take the wheel and actually doing the work, and if the connect, communicate, collaborate, contribute, it would happen. So it really is, we're the bottleneck. We as leaders and as human beings, in seeking our own name, our own whatever, we are the bottleneck. So those 4 C's at the end of the day, it is contingent on us allowing the Lord to work in us.
So with that being said, it reminds me yesterday morning, just while I was spending some time in the Word, I'm in Jeremiah. It's very exciting, very motivating. It is not disheartening at all to read Jeremiah. Little sarcasm there. But randomly, little chapter 45 is kind of in the middle of everything that's going on. The people had just gone down to Egypt, and God said through Jeremiah, don't go to Egypt. If you do, I'll do nothing but disaster. Because when God told them to stay in Jerusalem, they went to Egypt. And when God told them, don't go to Egypt, they stayed in Jerusalem. They're just always doing the opposite of what God wanted them to do. And after all that gets done, there's this little chapter in Jeremiah, short, just kind of tossed in randomly, 45. And if you don't mind for just a second, it's not very long. I'm going to read it. This is the word that the prophet Jeremiah spoke to Baruch, the son of Neriah, when he wrote these words on a scroll at Jeremiah's dictation in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. So this is his amanuensis, right? This is the guy that wrote Jeremiah as Jeremiah talked to him about what needed to be written down. And this is before the fall of Jerusalem, because Jehoiakim is still in charge. And it says, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says to you, Baruch. All right. So Jeremiah has a word specifically to the guy whose entire job was to do nothing but to sit and listen to Jeremiah and write down what Jeremiah is saying, that the Lord's saying, and what he's learning. But what that means is that Baruch had to go through all the same crap that Jeremiah went through. So think about it. Jeremiah is a prophet. He at least is seen as God's prophet. And so he's having a hard time going through all of this with the people, because he's telling them this is what God's going to do. And then he watches them disobey. And then he has to live through the very thing that he warned them they didn't have to go through. Okay. But at least he's seen as God's prophet. This is the guy who just simply writes down the stuff that Jeremiah says, but he's so connected to Jeremiah as a friend and as a brother and as a partner in the ministry that he's living through all of this stuff. And his entire job is just to write down what Jeremiah says. Okay. That's some serious loyalty. So this is what the Lord of God Israel says to you, Baruch. You have said, woe is me, because the Lord has added misery to my pain. I would say so, right? He's living through all this destruction. Yep. I am worn out with groaning and have found no rest. This to me was so striking. This is what you are to say to him. Baruch, this is what the Lord says. What I have built, I am about to demolish, and what I have planted, I'm about to uproot the whole land. But as for you, do you pursue great things for yourself? Stop pursuing, for I'm about to bring disaster on all humanity. This is the Lord's declaration. But I will grant you your life like the spoils of war wherever you go. He literally says to Baruch, I know you want to do great things with your life, but you need to stop pursuing those things and do what I've called you to do. Wow. And I just, honestly, Mark, I read that yesterday, and it was just like the Lord's, I thought I had died to myself, right? So over and over and over and over again. And it was literally the Lord's way of saying, don't pursue your dreams, pursue my purposes, right? And somebody would say, well, our dreams ought to be his purposes. I agree. I totally agree. But even the way in which I pursue what I think God wants to do is one of those pieces where we come back and we say, it's a heart posture. It is. It's the exact same thing you were just saying, which I found ironic because it's what the Lord was saying to me yesterday through Jeremiah. It's a heart posture of, what do I have to do? And what's it going to take? If I need to be a mop, in the back of the room, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And with that heart posture, then those 4 C's can really move us forward. Wow. Because otherwise I'm actually stopping all of the connecting from happening, communicating, collaborating, because I'm attaching myself to building all this stuff. Yeah, that's good. Well, and you and I both know this, that as soon as, when my pride enters into the conversation, all I'm doing is creating inefficiency and slowness to something that doesn't need it. And so to steal a Covey phrase, basically life operates at the speed of trust. And anytime I put my selfish ambition into the equation, I'm creating an environment that is distrust. And we may not understand why we don't trust each other. And we may trust each other a little bit, but it limits the amount. And one of the things I would just say in terms of why you and I even get together and podcast is because I've gotten to a point in my relationship with you where somebody would go, well, what do you think? I talk to Mark and I'll be like, well, whatever Mark says is probably about what I think. Even if it's something that I'm a little bit different than you on, I trust you enough to know that even if there's some nuances, generally speaking, you and I are going to be pretty much on the same page because we've spent so much time connecting. Yeah. We've spent so much time contributing, collaborating, communicating, right? Yeah. That I just implicitly trust you about most everything. And that just allows things to happen super quickly. Yeah. And I just think the only way that happens is with those 4 C's over and over and over again. That's good. And then that leads to the we mentality and mindset versus just the I. And that's what it's going to take to get the job done. So real quick, for you to explain the 4 C's, go through them and give me what you would say your basic definition of each of those looks like. Yeah, I wasn't ready to do that. That's all right. I'm putting you on the spot. These are your brainchild. They just kind of popped out there. So what do you think? What do you think you want people to understand when they hear those 4? Yeah. So connect, I think, when I think of just connecting as believers, as disciple makers, it's just showing value. Initially, it's just, hey, I value you, you value me. And that really is the beginning of the walls going down and the trust being built. The communicate is learning how to do that in an effective way where
finding common ground, common language to start with, and then moving towards the edges and the needs of the kingdom. So that's the communicate. The collaborate is to find, as we pursue the advancing of the kingdom, where that needs to continue to grow, whether that's out there in the mission field or in the depth and the growth of our churches and our disciples, collaborating around the missional edge of those of the common challenge or the need for it to grow, brings us together, because there's nothing that's going to help us more connect and begin to get in that posture of collaborating than being at the edge. And then when I think of your addition of that, the contribute piece, it's been the main thing we've talked about in this episode, but it's about me dying to self and seeing where do I fit, and then bringing that piece into every circle or situation that I'm in.
Yeah, because if I see myself as simply a part and not the point, and if everybody brings that mentality into the conversation, then the connections, the communication, and the collaboration, man, it can get oiled up and run really, really, really well.
That's good.
On what we're doing. I really do hope that as people listen to this, that they do walk away and say, how do we build trust with each other?
Yeah.
What is it that we have to do to become brothers who love one another and trust each other and give each other the benefit of the doubt in generous ways, so that even when we disagree, we know that we're not assigning motivations and we're not assigning ill intent, and we're able to see each other in very gracious ways, because that only just furthers the connection, and only furthers the communication, it only furthers the collaboration, and it only furthers your ability to contribute to what God's doing.
Yeah. And if we'll do all of that, then we can see Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and the ends of the earth. So
all at the same time.
All at the same time. That's right.
Always
we'll
fun,
leave it
Mark.
there. Yeah, this is good. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.